Uh, Basic Action Games is the company. Yeah, Bashman is the handle I go by online a lot. Yes, yes. All right, sure. So I'm Chris Sarkowski. I'm the creator of Bash and the superhero RPG and Honor and Intrigue swashbuckling RPG system. And the the current Kickstarter that I'm running, the Tome of Intriguing Options, is for the Honor and Intrigue swashbuckling RPG system. So it's essentially about a whole bunch of options to add to the game that you can essentially take a game that was ostensibly for 17th century pirates and musketeers and then have it be in space or in a high fantasy world with elves and dwarves, also aliens and robots and all kinds of other things in there. So it's essentially been it's a huge expansion to the system that the Kickstarter is to put it all in one book, uh, all in full color. You froze. Uh oh. Well, I cannot hear you anymore if you're still talking. I'm going to try to log out and log back in. I think that might be the best way to handle this. Ah, okay, I can see again.
Well, looks like I should be back.
I cannot hear you now, though.
Oh,
I can see
awesome.
you.
Oh, jeez. Can you hear me
And we're
now?
back. Yes, I can hear
Yay!
that.
I love this. The fun of doing everything on the fly. No matter how many times I have all this set up and it's like, it works. And then like 5 minutes later, it's like, I don't want to work no more. Uh,
Yeah.
okay. Let's see. Okay, my joke was because you said your expansion is for swashbuckling and pirates and the like. What's a pirate's favorite letter?
R.
No, his first love is always the sea. Sorry, I can never pass up telling a bad pirate joke.
Yeah.
Uh, I even told that one to the designer of Pirate Borg at event earlier this year, and he was like, "Oh God, why did I see that coming?" He goes, "I should have more pirate jokes on deck for events." I was like, "If you have a game called
Yes.
Pirate Borg, yes, you should have a whole slew of just bad pirate puns available."
Yes.
So a place I always like to start. So you talk to everybody a little bit about what you have already going and in the works on Kickstarter. Quickly, let's. Where did you start your gaming history at? What was your first RPG?
I guess for me, it starts in the public library coming home from school, and I would the our school, or not school library, but the public library in the city that I grew up in had a very nice collection of D&D books. And the thing that got me into those is reading through like the choose your own adventure books, but they had the D&D ones called Endless Quest books. And I started really enjoying those, and then I found out, oh well, there's an actual game like with dice and like math that you can play and make up your own stories with instead of just picking which page to turn to. And so I started flipping through those books and reading them, and so like essentially AD&D, I guess, would be my first game that I read. I didn't really understand what I was reading though, but that Christmas I got the D&D Black box set for Christmas, and that was my first game that I ever actually ran.
So that would have been in sometime in the 90s.
It would have been. It was, I think, 1990 exactly.
Yeah, yeah, the second edition box set.
It was.
Well, it was the weird time when they were, yeah, that was a weird time for TSR.
Yeah, it came with like a flip mat dungeon thing that, and like little paper miniatures and stuff to set up for it.
Yeah,
This was made for kids as opposed to the
yeah.
AD&D first ed books that I was reading that I didn't understand.
No, no.
Were written for adults.
Yeah, my brother's 9 years older than me, so I was introduced through AD&D. We saved up our chore money and bought the AD&D Player's Handbook, and then got home, and then we're very upset to find out that that's only part of the rules. So we needed
Yes,
another.
we need the DMG to actually know how to play.
Exactly. You're like, we can make characters. Now what do we do with them? I don't know.
I remember Hackmaster had like jokes about that in their actual rules, that like the original Hackmaster said, "Oh, but if you want the to hit tables, you have to be a GM because that's all in the GM book. So what we recommend you do is force your younger brother to play a game with you, where you'll GM a game for them, so that you're allowed to look at the DMG, to look at the chart."
Yeah, Hackmaster was awesome. I loved it. I loved Hackmaster Fourth Edition, their first edition, and that came about because when WotC bought TSR, they released that CD compilation of all the Dragon magazines. Well, the contracts, the agreements that the people that made Knights at Dinner Table had with TSR was, hey, you guys can print this all you want. We have the digital rights. So, they had the foresight to think of digital rights in the 90s, when that was kind of a foreign concept for most people. Like, what are you going to do? Put it on a website?
Like, all right, I'm going to download this Dragon magazine and it'll be ready in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even if you're going to their website to look at a web cartoon, which was kind of an anathema at the time, like it didn't really exist. I mean, that would have taken forever to download. Who's going to dial up and go look at your little cartoon strip? Well, so they put them out on those DVD, or on those discs, and they, the Knights of the Dinner Table guys came and said, hey, you guys don't have the rights to publish our stuff that way. And they were like, oh. So they got some sort of monetary settlement out of it. I don't know what it was,
wow.
but
I did not realize it.
But the other part of their settlement was they got to use AD&D Second Ed core rules to make an actual Hackmaster game.
Yes.
So
and it was funny. It was like the OSR before OSR.
Yeah. So it was.
They had to kind of make jokes in it so that it's a parody. So it's covered under fair use. It's parody.
Well, they didn't even need to. They had all the agreements because of that. Yeah.
They did.
It wouldn't have been Hackmaster without the humor and the over the top everything. I mean, it's the greatest.
The monster book had a yield descriptor of every creature, of like what you could make out of all of its various viscera that you remove from its corpse.
Silly things like that I absolutely loved. I loved the GM screen that has just charts upon charts. I did love it. Did have a wheel chart of alignment. So I actually used that over the years because some people hate alignments, but for I like using alignments in games. For Star Wars, something like that, alignment doesn't make any sense. But when you have a complex world of thieves guilds and clerics and everything, alignment can really help. And then I'd kind of keep track of where players' decisions move them along, and the little wheel really helped because I was like, oh, you're getting a little more towards neutral, or hey, you're no longer lawful good. You're going to shift over to chaotic good here soon if you're not careful. And I would give the clerics the warning, but like thieves and stuff, I wouldn't give them any warning. I would just keep note. And then all of a sudden, when they interact with another thieves guild, they're like, "Well, here's the things we've heard about you, and your kind's not welcome here anymore." And they were like, "What?" And I was like, and then I talked to them. I was like, "Hey, your alignment technically is now you're good instead of chaotic neutral." And they're like, "No."
Yeah, yeah.
And it was
Honor
this,
and Intrigue.
yeah, yeah. It
Yeah,
was
so
this,
the Honor and Intrigue doesn't have alignment. What I did with that is instead I have motivation. So every character has like, it's usually like the top of the character sheet right next to the guy's name is their motivation. And so it could be like one character is motivated by altruism, another's motivated by promoting their reputation as a bounty hunter or a swordsman or whatever. Another guy wants is motivated by the knowledge, seeking the truth, right? For knowledge or something. But that's like the thing that guides the character is like, all right, are you going to do something that's going to further that motivation, or are you going to resist it, right? Like, so if you want to resist it, you'd have to pay up a fortune point to resist it. So if let's say if your guy's dedicated to knowledge, uh, and you know that, oh, there's these forbidden books over here. Oh, I shouldn't go get those because it's banned, and I could be arrested for heresy or something if I try to break into the thing of the forbidden books. Well, then you have to give up a fortune point. But if you go and risk something for those forbidden books, then you earn a fortune point. So.
See, and I love stuff like that because with D&D we had we had alignment, and that was an easy way to kind of prod especially characters like clerics into doing the right thing. Like, hey, that's not really the direction your character should be going.
Yeah.
But you've added a less strict, a little more nebulous way of keeping characters kind of on their personal track.
Yeah. Yes, and everyone has one, right? But they pick. And if your guy is like a selfish guy that's all out for myself, well, then you might have survival or wealth or whatever as your motivation. But you still have something that's motivating you.
Exactly. And because even in real life we have motivators. So like all the people that tell me, oh, we got to get rid of alignment. I was like, if you get rid of alignment, you have to replace it with something because it just makes sense. We
It's a
have
shortcut of what your character is going to be wanting to do.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Usually an
you're
easy decision to make is.
yeah, you're a blank slate, and the characters drift a lot. They don't end up with a solid. Just they're amorphous blob meandering through a storyline with stats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of amorphous blobs meandering through storylines.
Yeah. A lot of games have their own equivalents of an alignment, though. Like, White Wolf has its whole humanity
Mhm.
track for the sorry, for the vampires and stuff. Yeah. So games have a tendency, like superhero games, like will often have some kind of thing about popularity, right? That affects like your character's popularity based on how you act or karma or whatever that they have. Like in Bash, I had acclaim and infamy that characters could gain. Basically, if they did something bad, they would gain infamy, and if they did something good, they'd gain acclaim. And it would be like kind of this in-game reward or punishment based on what they were doing. But it would guide their behavior towards not purposefully breaking people's stuff, like not purposefully smashing someone's car just to show off. You know.
Yeah.
kind of things that they might do.
Well, that's it's one of the things I like about superhero games is everybody everybody innately understands, you know, kind of left and right limits of being a superhero.
Yeah.
Because we've all grown up with comic books, and you can push the envelope from time to time. So DC had what was it, Booster Gold. He was a movie star that,
Yes.
and
A wannabe movie star.
yeah.
He was a Yeah. He was a college quarterback who shaved points. Who was caught shaving
Hmm.
points and got kicked out of playing football and ended up getting a job as a janitor at a museum. And this was in the future. And he then stole a bunch of stuff from the museum and traveled back in the past. And the items that he stole would give him powers. And he wanted to use his knowledge of the future to get rich and famous in the past.
Yeah, and it's like, but he's still a weirdly enough with that backstory, he's still a good guy trying to do
Mm-hmm.
good things.
Yes,
And
for a bad reason.
yes, so I've always loved that character because he has
Yeah,
uh, such a silly origin story for a superhero,
yes,
but
yeah,
innately people, the vast majority of people you're going to run into are good. So even if you run into somebody, I stole a bunch of high tech stuff from a futuristic museum and I came back in time to make myself rich and powerful, and here I am doing good instead of
yes,
being rich and powerful.
yes. Well, he's trying to do both. I think
Yeah.
mostly I think mostly by leaning on Ted Cord, the success of the Blue Beetle. Like, hey, let's go into business and be partners. With your genius and my, I guess, charisma,
Yeah,
we'll go places, man.
exactly. Yeah, the Blue Beetle and him were. I think that was actually a genius mashup of those two,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
Blue Beetle was kind of floundering when that character came around, and then it was just like, hey, how do we keep Booster Gold grounded? How do we move this character forward and make him more I guess likable by from people, and just marrying him up with Blue Beetle was a genius idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, like, as a kid, I'd never actually even heard of Booster Gold, but I when I read the box set rules for the DC Heroes, I think second edition RPG was the black box set, the one that I
Hmm.
have. I remember reading the rules for that, and all of the example text, or like half of the example text of how to play, is all Booster Gold. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, who's this Booster Gold guy? And so I'd like flip to the section of the book that described the characters. I'm like, this guy is this guy is like a supervillain who just saves old ladies and cats and trees for for the reputation, or just to get his name in the newspaper or something.
Exactly. The worst supervillain ever.
Yes.
Yeah, we actually have a copy of that box set. And
Yeah.
then Mutants and Masterminds, so that's by Green Ronin.
Yes.
And so
Stevenson.
they've been doing the Mutants and Masterminds. They're on the third edition now.
Yes.
It's been around for a little while. So
The third edition's like 14 years old or something like
is it?
that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it came out in, like, I want to say, like 2010 or
Yeah.
2009 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I was still active duty military when first edition came out, and man, first edition had luck was broken. I'll just say that. When I picked up the second edition book when it came out, flipping through it, I looked up luck and I was like, the GM in me was so happy that they fixed it, but the player in me was so mad that they fixed it.
Yeah, yeah.
But they put out a 4-book set of all the DC stuff, 2 books of the all the
Yes.
heroes and villains, and it was really cool to go through there and see the different characters that were available. It was awesome that they
And
were
how
able to
they
get that.
changed, how the builds were different and stuff, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, the DC box set was written in like when the second edition black box set came out just after the Crisis, I believe. Right?
Something
Crisis on
like that.
Infinite Earths,
Yeah.
I think it's just
Um,
and
yeah.
so like it was basically here's the new universe in 1989 when we put
Yeah.
this stuff out. And I remember like the book's description of how the DC universe is different than the real world, and saying like in the DC universe there are supercomputers that can process megabytes of information at once. Like, just laughing reading it. The
Oh,
Soviet Union is still. I'm like oh my gosh, the
yeah.
the Soviet Union fell like a year after this book came out.
Well, you know the game Twilight 2000.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
So Twilight 2000 came out. The first edition came out in the mid 80s, and the nuclear apocalypse happens. You're a U.S. soldier stationed in West Germany, and you know atomic bombs went off everywhere. And now you're now traveling across Europe trying to figure out how to get home. So second edition, same thing.
Hopefully, you'll see the 1001 Luftballons.
Yeah.
You know,
So the second edition came
99.
out. Yeah, 99 Luftballons by Nena.
Mhm.
And then the parody version, the 99 Dead Baboons, which, if you've never heard that, look it up. It's
I never heard
hilarious.
that one.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
gonna look that up.
It is amazing.
Mhm.
Now I want to sing it. Once you have it in your head, it'll never go away. So the second edition of Twilight 2000 comes out, and like 3 months after it releases, the Soviet Union falls. So they did a second edition revise that just made Russia the bad guy instead of the Soviet Union, because they had to go like,
Yeah.
oh great, hey, we released a game and your entire nation falls apart and ruins our bad guy for this futuristic game. Because it was set in the year 2000.
Right.
It's like, hey, it's 1989, and now Soviet Union no longer exists. Sorry there, buddy. You're like, what?
Yeah.
Or
Remember
91,
the
excuse me.
game of the game of the dark far future, Cyberpunk 2020.
Yes.
Like 1980 something.
Came out in 1988, September 1988, if I recall correctly. But there was a Cyberpunk prior to that, so there was just the base Cyberpunk, and then they came out with Cyberpunk 2022, and then 2022 came around, and then we now have Cyberpunk Red. Artel Sorian is just right up the road from where I'm at. They're good friends of the library.
Mike Pondsmith is an alum of my college, UC Davis. He used to actually, I believe, he attended the on-campus gaming club they have there. Dragon is what it's called. Don't quote me on that, but I think that he used to be a regular attendee of that.
I absolutely believe it. He is a massive nerd, and I love him. I love his whole family. Mike, Lisa, and Cody are great. It's funny. Mike and Lisa came by the library at PAX Unplugged one time, and then they just started looking at books on the shelves, and like it was funny because they had pulled off a book. They were like, "Oh, do you see these little holes here?" They go, "That's where we sat up all night stapling tiny little dice into every single one of these books." It's like, early on,
Wow.
yeah. It's the dice are long gone, but they were stapling little packs of dice into every single book to ship out.
What was the point? What were these? Doesn't it just use D10s or something?
This was another game. It was oh god, it's one of my favorite games from them. It's a game I point out all the time. Teenagers from Outer Space.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Which
I know of its existence. I don't know any details about the system.
It is a game that I call in a category I call palate cleansers, because it's
Like,
great. It's
like
great
Paranoia.
for Paranoia is great for one shots as well. Paranoia you can run a longer game, but it's way more fun to run a short game. a 1 or 2 session game of Paranoia than it is to run, you know, a 6 month session of it. And so, like Teenage from Outer Space, all these little games like that, I put into the palate cleanser. So, hey, we've been playing this, 8 month campaign and we're all done now. Everybody's stressed. Let's play something that is entirely different than what we've been playing before we move on to either a new campaign or a whole new game.
Yeah.
So, what was your first game you created?
Oh, okay. No, not the first I published. The first I ever created, like, period.
Yes.
So when I was in middle school, I had gotten the basic D&D box set under my belt, and I was at this time also getting hugely into Marvel Comics. And at this time, there was also trading cards. God, I have a pile of them back behind me. There were these trading cards that had all the different X-Men and different superheroes and stuff, and
Had all the
their
powers on the
stats
back.
with these little numeric scores, right? And it was things like strength, energy projection, fighting, like these like 5 or 7 stats or something. And I thought, hey, what if I used these dice from the D&D game and made this into a game? And so, and I didn't know there was already a Marvel superheroes game out, like, that existed. I had no idea. I thought that D&D was it, right? So I'm like, oh, but I'm gonna invent one. So like I took the cards and I used those as the stats for the characters, and I made it so, like, okay, a 1 in the stat is a D4, a 2 in the stat is a D6, a 3 in the stat is a D8, and so on up to a D20. And then I'll make them fight each other. So you roll, like, one person rolls, like they're fighting against the other person's fighting, and whoever rolls higher wins. That was the game. That was the game. But I was so proud of this thing. I called it the Marvel game, and I like drew it and colored it in the cover on binder paper and stuff.
So
So that was the first game I ever made.
that's hilarious because those same Marvel cards. So I grew up in a comic book store. So early '80s. Father was retired from the military. We started a used book store that my brother and I convinced my dad and mom and dad to put comics in, and the comics took over. And then we brought in RPGs and stuff. So it was funny. We move up to the Washington area, and this is about a year before Magic comes out. And one of the kids I'm in school with, his dad works over at Wizards of the Coast, and I'm over at the house, and he shows me this new game, and it's all the stuff that's still glued to playing cards.
Right.
So they're off actually building the actual cards, and then he's like, would you collect these? Because a lot of people at the company had, collecting of a card, that your card game just was this weird anathema. Like, this is never going to work. This is the dumbest idea. And, after playing it, I was like, oh, this is really cool. And he's like, but say you got them in randomized and, some of the cards were rare. I was like, sir, I'm a comic book. My family owns a comic book store. I'm trying to create games based on the cards we already collect that are, superheroes. And I'm trying to do something for the Marvel and the DC cards. And he's like, really? It's just like, he was one of those people that just thought that, collecting something was this weird idea that, like, why would you play with something you collect? I was also, like, early on in Magic, I had all my cards in sleeves, and everybody was like, what are you doing? I'm like, my cards are in nicer shape than yours. Huh. Just saying. Yes. So it's funny that you were creating an RPG based off those Marvel cards, and I was trying to create a collectible card game before they existed. And
Yes.
and still, Marvel and DC have not been able to do a good superhero collectible card game, but nobody's really touched
No,
Magic.
that's
So
unfortunate.
yeah,
I mean, the closest is HeroClix, but it's not a card game; it's a miniatures game.
Yeah, I had a
And
blast with HeroClix.
hey, man, I am one of their biggest customers, and I've never played the game of HeroClix, not even once. I buy those things, I pop them off. I pop them off the base. I don't care what the rarity of the miniature is. I rip it right off the base, and I glue it onto a clear plastic base, because of the size, right? Because
Yeah.
to fit on a 1 by 1 inch grid,
That
they're
that
too big.
yeah.
So, but for fitting them on to like, so I put them on a 1 inch base and use it for running all of my superhero games. So
No,
all of my
yeah.
bash campaigns I've been using hero clicks mostly for my miniatures. Sometimes I'll repaint them because you get duplicates, right? So I'll repaint it to like, oh, the American Wonder should have this color on his uniform and like repaint it. But I, I buy tons of those miniatures.
Yeah, and well, and it's funny because they were they put out Mage Knight, Hero Quest, and the BattleTech stuff, and the quality was meh for ages.
Yeah.
And you look at what WizKids is putting out now, and their quality is so amazing for like their D&D minis. It's just bonkers. I also love that WizKids saved what is it, Shadowrun? They've since sold it on to Catalyst Games, but I mean, it they published the fourth edition of it, and then they brought back BattleTech. It was funny. A friend from when I was a little kid, he was like, "Oh, God, I hate it. I hate that stupid little Mech Warrior, toy game." And I was like, go to your BattleTech group and ask how many people got started with BattleTech off of those minis. And a couple weeks later, he sends me a message. He's like, "Holy crap!" He goes, "I'm the only person here that didn't start with those." And he goes, a ton of people got into BattleTech, the entire world, through those MechWarrior minis. So I love WizKids for that. And they're one of the few decent, superhero games that's out there for tabletops. I think almost the only superhero thing out there for tabletops.
Well, there's Crisis Protocol, but that's like high end, right? Because for one, those miniatures are like twice the size of the hero clicks, right? Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures are like this tall, and they're made for like the collector who wants to painstakingly paint their miniature and stuff. So it's made at a larger scale, right? And I partly suspect that and I have no proof of this. This is all just my guess. Is that part of the reason why they're so much larger scale is so that you won't be able to use them with HeroClix that you got for a lot less money.
It still boggles my mind that WizKids has both the Marvel and the DC license for those minis.
Yeah, but hey, it was a good idea for both of them, right? Marvel and DC
Okay.
also jointly own the word superheroes, which I I find hard to imagine why that should be legal, but they both do jointly own the word superhero.
Yeah.
So everyone else's games have to be like supers or powered people or something. Like you can't
Yeah.
use the word superhero in the title.
Well, that's the funny thing is
Which I
I
didn't
just
know when I first released Bash. I didn't know that, and it was an acronym for Basic Action Superheroes.
yeah,
Now
no,
it's just
well,
Bash.
yeah. So I just think it's one of those things that nobody's ever tried to contest. Because I know Games Workshop has tried several times to trademark the word Space Marine, but they keep getting told no because that pre-exists them by 40 years. Whereas I don't think anybody's challenged Marvel or DC on that just because DC's been around since the 1930s.
Oh, and if DC wants what you've got, they'll sue you until it's
Yeah,
theirs. Like
exactly.
Fawcett, what they did with Fawcett Comics and Captain Marvel.
Yeah. Um,
They kept losing those lawsuits. We're gonna sue Fawcett Comics and say that they stole the idea of Captain Marvel was stolen from Superman because he's clearly exactly the same, which
yeah.
he wasn't. And well, we sued and we lost because the court said that no, this character actually is different from Superman.
Very different.
So we find in favor of the defendant. All right. Well, how much did that cost them to defend in court? Well, about 10% of all the money they've got. Let's sue them 9 more times,
Yep.
and then we'll make them an offer for the character. to buy the
Yeah.
rights.
Well, that's a sad thing. 'Cause Disney is one of the worst companies about that. They will, if anybody even comes remotely close to something, they will be happy to sue, and then they'll put continuances and extensions and everything. It's like, you know, I know somebody that his family got sued by Disney over something,
Jeez.
and it was like 11 years, and it never went to court, and they finally just settled out of court, basically saying, "Hey, we'll never publish our product again." Yeah, it's like,
Yikes.
yeah, it's really stupid, and it cost them, everything they earned off their original product, and
Yikes.
if you've got lawyers working for you full time, and you can do that, you can do that.
Yeah.
Whereas, someone like yourself or like myself, we don't have a lawyer on retainer, well, let alone retainer. We just, we don't have lawyers working for us full time, let alone on retainer.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, like I Captain Marvel's always been one of my more favorite characters, and like in the DCU, and like, but I always get a little bit sad about like, well, the way that DC acquired the rights to that
Yeah.
character.
Well, and then they messed up, and then they had to call him Shazam for a long time because they let his trademark or something lapse. And when they tried to bring it back, Marvel's like, "Hang on, we're Marvel. You can't have a character named Captain Marvel." And they're like, "But," and they
You
had to,
changed it. You changed your name from Timely after Captain Marvel.
yep. And then, but
Like
when,
Marvel used to be Timely Comics.
yep. Well, Timely Comics was a very different company than what Marvel, because Timely had a like a smattering of heroes and had a lot of like pulp
Timely
and
did have the original Human Torch. They had the
mhm.
original Human Torch and Captain America and Namor,
And
who
that
at the
was, yeah,
time were all separate comics. But then in the 60s, I guess thinking that no one would know any better, they decided to release, hey, here's the lost episodes of starring these three characters called the All Winners Squad. And they were totally a team that were all friends together.
yeah.
And it's like, yeah, of course Namor was going out on missions with Captain America like they were best friends. I believe that.
But what Timely was doing was more pulp and the like. So with the name change, they it gave them the ability to dump all the pulp stuff that wasn't selling any longer and go full hog
Yeah.
into the superhero stuff that was really picking up in. It was just the early '60s was a
Yeah.
great time for that.
Well, the comics code really helped put the nail in the coffin for any comics that weren't
Oh, yeah.
superheroes, because like there were those congressional hearings and all
Hmm.
this nonsense where they're saying you're causing juvenile delinquency because kids never did anything bad before comics existed. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that led to the comics code being created. Hey, we'll censor ourselves so that you won't do it to us. And
Yep.
yeah, so then they stopped making horror comics and stopped making like two-fisted mystery solving guys with guns and stuff, and just
Yep.
had colorful
Yeah.
costume people instead.
Yeah, that hurt the Shadow and Phantom, because yeah, and then that was around the time that Batman had already been going no guns. But if you look at the first handful of episodes of Batman, while the first comic book of Batman was basically a direct ripoff of the Shadow. I forget
Yes.
it was like a shot or a panel for panel recreation of a Shadow comic, and he uses guns and everything. And then
Yes.
Batman's been feverishly anti-gun since the comics code came out. Like,
Yeah.
miraculously so. It's like that man shot a lot of people prior to that. The comics code. So I take it you're a big superhero fan. That's why you created.
I am. That's true. Even though that's not what I'm here to talk about.
But that's where you got your start in. That was
Yes.
your first publication.
Not publication. My first
Oh.
game that I made that two people saw.
Two people saw.
Yeah.
So you have basic action games or bashrpg.org because you drop the.
Yeah, bashrpg.com is the website.
Oh, I said .org. Yeah, it's .com. Linked
Yeah.
it in the linked in the chat, and afterwards I'll make sure on at least on YouTube it's down in in the information. So if anybody's looking, it'll be down here if you're watching this in the future. So tell us a little bit about how you got into actually, like, it's a big step from creating something and actually publishing something.
Yeah. So I did when I was in college. I tried making a game that I called Epoch, and this was when I was like, oh, I want to make it more realistic than D&D. Like I wanted my game to be realism, have realism, man. And like it was this skill-based, percentile-based system. That was the first thing I attempted to publish, but this was like I was going to Kinko's and physically printing out copies to send to people and stuff.
Hey, that,
Like
I try.
scanning, using the scanning machines in the college computer room to get like using actual tape, like whiteout tape, to hold the art onto the page to scan to copy it.
Nice.
And so that was the first thing I attempted to do. It was not commercially successful at all. Like 10 people heard of it.
Yeah, but
But
it's where some of the best stuff is started. I remember going to conventions back in the '80s and seeing this game that was mimeographed and being sold for
yes,
$1. And we call them zines now, but they were just like, I've got this great idea. Here's the quick start. And they didn't call it a quick start guide because that didn't exist. That concept.
exactly.
Here's a breakdown of my rules. Let me know if you like it. My address is on the back. Please write me a letter.
I wish I'd thought of that part. That would have been smart to include. Hey, here's how to contact me.
Yeah. I wish I still had all those ones that I had a soft spot for all those crazy creators back in the '80s, and every time I went to one of those, and I'm just a little kid to a teenager, spending my hard-earned $1 or $2 at an event with those. But I love them, and I guarantee that some of those people have gone on to
Oh, sure.
done big things. So I mean,
No doubt.
you went through the craziness of hand creating something, and then you've gone on and now have your small company. So Honor and Intrigue, where did that come from?
All right. So Honor and Intrigue. So by this point, I had already published Bash, and that had been somewhat commercial success by this point. And I had, even before Bash was published, I had been corresponding online with Simon Washburn, who is the guy who created Barbarians of Lemuria RPG.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both in the same chat rooms of this one other game, and like we kind of clicked online, and we would email each other. Oh, this is the thing. This is the superhero system I've been thinking about publishing, right? And he's like, oh, here's the sword and sorcery RPG I'm thinking about publishing, right? And so we looked at each other's stuff like before they became actually published. And years later, right, I was working on doing a superhero. I was working on. I've been working on an idea for a swashbuckling RPG, and I had the combat system already figured out, and I had the stats, the attributes that I wanted to use, figured out. But I had this overly complex skill system, all right, where it was like the sword skill has like 15 different sub skills or something, right? And it was like overly complicated. And I had signed up to run a one shot of this game later this week, right? Like I have to run a one shot of it in 3 days. And I remember thinking, this skill system, I'm only halfway done writing it. It's not ready. I'm gonna send an email to Simon and see if he'd be okay with me using the skill system from Barbarians of Lemuria for this for my own game. And he says, sure. And actually, while we're on the subject, I've been thinking about making a sword and sorcery kind of Solomon Kane type game, like a 17th century type setting for Barbarians of Lemuria. Would you be willing to help with this? And I said, sure. So we began working on it to like I began working on stuff with him via correspondence for a while, and then he had, I'm not sure if it was that he was busy with another project or whatever, but he said, I'm going to step away from this. I'm not I'm gonna I can't remember what the reasoning was, but I'm going to hand this over to you, right? So I'm going to let you create this the way that you want to do it, right? And so I had his blessing to use uh, the the chassis of the Barbarians of Lemuria task resolution system, and then I added on to that the swashbuckling elements like the dueling styles and the advantage system and the fortune points and the ship to ship combat and all this other stuff that I added to to make it honor and intrigue.
Yeah, I
And
haven't.
that's how it got
Yeah,
started.
I have not played the the Barbarians game. Brain just all of a sudden. Sorry, cat.
Yeah, Barbarians of Lemuria. Yeah.
Cat made my brain go. Yeah, they're good at that.
Hmm.
I have not. I have not played that game, but you know it's hard to play every game that's out there.
Yes.
The library is, you know, we're estimating somewhere between 7 and 8 thousand books now.
Oh wow.
I mean, I've played probably close to 100 different systems, and that's not counting, you know, like fifth ed is a system, and there's a ton of stuff for that's based on 5e. So if I've
Yes.
played 5 or 6 different ones of those, they all count as one system. So it is funny that, you know, people are like, oh, why haven't you played this? I'm like, whew, if I had an answer for every time somebody asked that. So with honor and intrigue,
Yeah.
well, so your new one is the swashbuckling
Yeah.
expansion for it.
So Honor and Intrigue actually is its own is a swashbuckling standalone game that has the same task resolution mechanic as Barbarians of Lemuria. So it's roll 2d6, try to get a 9 or better, and you succeed. Certain times you'll get to roll a third die and keep the best two. Sometimes you'll roll a third die and keep the worst two, right? But the general task resolution is roll 2 dice, try to get a 9, right? Um, the uh, so Honor and Intrigue is a swashbuckling version of that. So that's the one that adds things like fortune points to avoid getting shot, because in a swashbuckling movie, no one ever brings a gun to a sword fight, right? Like if you shoot someone, you could just if your character gets shot, you could spend a fortune point to say, "Oh, it shot the hat off my head in this
Yeah,
instance."
exactly. Yeah, because
But
you know, smoothbore pistols from that era, just so amazingly accurate.
correct,
You know,
exactly.
everybody gets nailed in the heart in the movies, but I have fired those pistols. I don't care how good of a shot you are, you're not a good shot.
Yeah. So that's part of the but it's essentially the fortune points are to emulate the genre tropes of swashbuckling. So the Richard Lester Three Musketeers movies were hugely influential on the design. So, for instance, oh, like, oh no, your husband is coming back, quick into the closet, and like you go into the closet, and now normally it'd be, if a normal game is like, okay, roll a hide check, all right, and you're gonna roll these dice, and if you roll well, you hid, and if you roll poorly, you didn't, and maybe it will be even a secret roll that the GM rolls and sees, and you don't know. But in this, you spend a fortune point, oh, you're automatically hidden, right? Automatically get hidden, automatically notice something, but you can also use the fortune points to avoid getting shot. You fall off of if you fall off of something, you can spend a fortune point to either grab onto a ledge or something, or you fall into like a hay bale or something at the bottom of the ledge that stops your fall or whatever. So um, yeah, that's the like the swashbuckling tropes are emulated by that, and then it has the advantage system for dueling, right? Where one of the ideas for the design was to make it emulate swashbuckling duels from the movies, like an Errol Flynn movie or something like that.
Or
And
Princess Bride.
exactly, Princess Bride, Three Musketeers, Pirates of the Caribbean, also big influence at the time. And but I watched tons of old swashbuckling movies,
Oh, some of the
like
old ones, yeah. Errol Flynn, like, and was
I got
truly
the
a talented sword fighter.
he was less talented than Basil Rathbone. Basil Rathbone actually studied fencing
Yeah,
before the filming, and Errol Flynn was like a gifted amateur, right? But who took to the training well, but during on the set of the movies, like when they're working with the trainer and stuff, Basil Rathbone would actually get compliments from the trainer, like the guy
yeah.
that's training them. He's like, you know how to you know what you're doing, don't you? And stuff.
It's like,
He's like, well, yes, I did study a little bit. All right, but yeah. So the game, it emulates the swashbuckling back and forth of the duels. Like in swashbuckling movies, two people don't just stand next to each other and take turns hitting each other until one of them falls over,
yes.
right? Which unfortunately, a lot of RPG combats work that way. So one of the things that I wanted to do is make it so that characters have to move around the battlefield, and so they're constantly jockeying about like around for position, and like ching 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 with the swords going up. Now I'm pushing you back up the stairs, and now you're going up to the edge of the cliff, and now you have no choice but to either fall off the cliff or, oh wait, I'm going to swing off this thing and land below you and catch the sword, right? And so the way that this works is through the system called yielding advantage. And heroes and villains, not nameless NPCs, but heroes and villains have 3 or more points of advantage that they can yield in a fight in lieu of taking damage. So if you get hit, you can choose to try and parry or dodge. You can choose to take the damage, or you can yield a point of advantage. When you get down to 0 advantage, your character's defeated, and your opponent gets to determine what happens to you at that point. So this is when the heroes get captured, or
Nice.
something like that, right? But um, but it could also just be that they say, I run him through and leave him for dead, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be that you get captured. But um, uh, so uh, yielding advantage is one of the things that kind of makes the system work, right? Because when you're running the game, like if you're running it like you would say, okay, I'm going to yield a point of advantage. On the bottom of the character sheet, there's even like a picture of like the guy with 3 advantages on guard and he's ready for anything, and the guy with 2 is retreating and he's like on his back foot, like kind of pedaling away, and then the person that's got down to 1 left is scrambling until the last one is defeated and he's got his sword dropped and all that. But if you yield a point of advantage, the venue of the duel moves a little bit. Like you get up the stairs, or he swings a sword and it just barely missed you. You roll over the desk, and the sword misses you, but it hits the desk, and like splinters are flying out of the desk and stuff. And then he's up after you, and you're scrambling to get out of the way, and going into the doorway, and so it's like kind of forcing movement into the combat so that it's more like these kind of choreographed duels from like the silver screen from the golden and silver age of Hollywood. It's kind of what it's trying to emulate.
Nice. I like, yeah, and like you said, most games, it's in D&D is because D&D came from a miniatures game, so they went from
Yes.
giant armies down to squads, down to you're
Yes.
controlling individuals in this unique squad. So it is a very static combat. No matter how dynamic
Yeah.
we try to make it, and everybody emulates that. There's been a few that have done some cool things, like Black Hat and Black Sword Hack. Uh, Basically, one thing that they've done is everything always hits, and it's up to you to parry, dodge, or do whatever. Which I was like, oh, that's actually really cool. And so, and you know, I've done some fencing and the like, and basically every shot's going to hit if I'm not going to do something to parry or dodge or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was like, I actually,
Yeah.
you know, little concepts like that I like because it throws the norm that we know that is, you know, D&D based combat that we've known for 40 years out the window, which
Yeah.
I'm very cool with that because if combat's going to last a long time, it better be enjoyable. Not I'm always doing the exact same thing over and over again.
Oh no.
Because that's been my
One of the other
problem.
things
Yeah.
with-
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the other things with Honor and Intrigue is with the action economy is that heroes and villains, again, nameless NPCs don't get this, but you have a major action and a minor action every round, and so the major action is going to usually be your attack, right? But your minor action can be something like, I'm going to try and bind our swords together. I'm going to like lock swords with him so that he can't hit me, right? That you could do that as a minor action. So you could be, I swipe at him to do an attack, and okay, the attack missed. All right, I'm going to bind his sword. All right, so now I have his sword bound so that it's going to be he cannot attack me with that sword unless he does something to get out of the bind, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to use footwork to get myself into a better position to defend this spot, or I'm going to shove him up against the wall, or I'm going to do a feint so that my next attack has a better chance to hit, and so on. So there's more stuff happening than just swinging at each other the whole time.
Nice. See, and I like games that go out of their way to not and we spend so much in time in combat in games. That's why I tell people games that are set in modern era that are fun and successful all tend to be spy games because, you know, in fantasy games we can throw armor on, we can do cool stuff, and swords are easier to escape. In the future, you've got armor that absorbs lasers and blah blah blah. But in modern era,
Yes.
person versus gun, really short time in a combat, and your character doesn't do well. Like, you were shot. Now what do? I'm going to drag myself into the corner and die. Can I roll up a new character? Yes, you can roll up a new Bond character.
Yeah.
And so, you know, modern based games, most of them spend time away from combat. But every other genre, we tend to be in combat. So make it interesting. Deadlands was a great example. Your initiative was done with a deck of cards. And if somebody went before you and shot at you or whatever, you could spend one of your unused actions to dodge. That was a really cool idea. And Savage Worlds does similar things to this day with that. And it's a way to make combat less static and drawn out.
Yeah.
Because what's the old joke? It takes 5 minutes to travel 3 days, and 3 days to do 5 minutes of combat.
Yeah, pretty much. The 5-minute adventuring day. Right?
Exactly. You're like, okay, we're going to travel to the next town, and you're there, and you're in combat. Okay, everybody dig in. This is going to be a while.
Yeah.
So I like that you have those action points that allow you to manipulate the situation.
Yeah, the fortune points.
Yeah, the fortune points. Sorry.
And you could spend them for doing all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Like you could spend one before you roll. Like, man, I really want this roll to hit. I'm going to spend one so I get to roll an extra die before I make the roll.
Yeah. So
Like that.
how many fortune points do you get starting out, and then how do you earn them?
So every quality, that's what the game calls attributes. Every quality is useful for combat in some way, right? So there's might, which is how physically strong and tough you are. So it's how much out damage you do with melee and how much damage you can take. right? So it's
Hmm.
10 plus your might. Like you don't have a lot of hit points in this system, which is why the yielding advantage is kind of important.
Yeah.
Um, the
Contrary to
daring
popular
is
belief, humans are very squishy things. We're pretty
yeah,
easy to
yeah,
kill.
yeah. You have 10 hit points, and a sword does a d6 of damage. So
Yeah.
you know, a gun, a musket does 2d6. So a musket
Yeah.
can very well kill you in one hit, right?
Absolutely.
A dagger can kill you in one hit if someone does it right. But anyway, the daring is the attribute that or quality that is used to hit with your melee attacks. It's like your main swordsmanship one, and also your like acts of physical courage, but also actual courage of like not tests to avoid fear and stuff like that. Uh, Savvy is the one that adds your it's in combat it's aim, but it's also added to your initiative rolls, and it's also used for active defenses like parry and riposte against an attack. But flair is the attribute or the quality that adds to how much fortune points you get. Flair is your character's je ne sais quoi, your panache, your joie de vivre, your other French word. No, your flair is your character's it's like a charisma type stat, but it's also luck. And so a character gets 3 points of fortune plus their flair. So because qualities are rated from -1 at the minimum to +3 at the max, typically at the start, unless you take like a boon that makes your maximum go up one, uh, a character is going to typically start between 2 points and 5, 6 points of fortune at the start of the session.
So
Although
your fortune
there are
is
the
your
exceptions.
pieces of flair, right?
Not quite,
I was
right? Like
making a joke for
yes, yes, office space.
yes, absolutely.
The
Uh,
minimum amount. Are you wearing the minimum amount of flair? Right.
if you want
Why
it to
don't you
be
just change the
16,
minimum?
make it 16.
Exactly.
As soon as you said
So
flair, that's the only place my brain could go. I was like,
yes,
oh great, fortune is how many pieces of flair you have.
yes. So flair is also useful for things like certain flashy maneuvers, like
Mhm.
throwing your sword or like cutting a Z on somebody's
Yeah.
cummerbund, right?
Because if you don't
As a
have any
tag
flair,
maneuver.
you're not going to have, a tag move or, you're not going to have that signature. Your
Yes.
signature move is going to be bash. Roar.
You can do it, but you can attempt. So that's one thing is you can attempt any dueling maneuver. There is no thing like, oh, you have to know the maneuvers to try them. No, you can anyone can do any maneuver, right? But you can also master the maneuvers. And so mastering maneuvers makes it so you usually get some kind of bonus to perform it, but also if you have a dueling style, the way that you master a dueling style is mastering all of the maneuvers that the style entails. And dueling styles give you other special abilities as well on top of what you get from just mastering maneuvers.
So without much flair and without any mastering, a signature move like Zorro, your lowest would be, hey, my signature move is a lowercase L. Then you
Yes.
work your way up to Zorro. Then when you've
Yes.
totally mastered it, I do a cursive Q with an umlaut over it.
Yes. 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 I remember actually GURPS Swashbucklers had the list of each letter of the alphabet had its own listed difficulty
Yes.
for
Oh,
slashing
I
with a sword.
forgot about that. I love GURPS. I love GURPS so much because there's just so much in that in that universe, in that wide. There's just books upon books of just so many things that are playable together. That's the mind-boggling thing. You're like, I'm gonna play swashbuckling werewolves because I have a book with werewolf in it, and I have a book with all the swashbuckling stuff in it. So, if it, we're gonna play a swashbuckling
Hmm.
werewolf game, and you're like,
and
somehow it
you
works.
kind of you kind of can do that in the with the tome of intriguing options. One of the things that I added is non-human species to play as a non-human ancestries, so your characters can be things like uh, um, wolfkin type things, like pack folk is what I call them, like canine humanoids right? But they could be anything from kitsune type fox people to like jackal folk or wolves or something. It depends on what build you want to do, but they're in there. I've got your standard elves and dwarves, but I also have like aliens. I have like Martians and Venusians, robots, all kinds of other
Is
stuff in
is your
there. So
Martians anything like
everything
John
that
Carter's
everything.
Martians?
So there are two types of Martians. There are steppe Martians who are four-armed barbarian giants, and there are sky Martians who pretty much look just like humans, but their skin is has a reddish tinge to it, and they live in cities with flying ships and stuff like that.
So
So you decide.
little little inspiration from John Carter.
Inspiration from all kinds of swashbuckling literature of all types,
Edgar Rice
and
Burroughs wrote some
and
amazing
inspiration,
stuff.
and yeah, and inspiration from Star Wars, and inspiration from um, like Pirates of Dark Water, and all kinds of other stuff is in there as well.
I got a copy of the Pirates of Darkwater RPG sealed,
Me too.
and is yours sealed?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I meant that I have a copy of it. I didn't mean that I had it sealed.
So if you know anybody that has an open copy that would be willing to do a trade and something, because I have a sealed copy of it, because there weren't that many that were sent out. They were all like demo copies before the game got axed.
Yeah.
And I've only seen one other copy of it. You're only the third person I've ever, outside of the library, that I know that has a copy. Yeah, most people don't know it exists. Either we've been trying to trade it to someone that wants a sealed copy, or we're going to end up opening it on stream or at an event somewhere or something. I don't know what we're going to do with it ultimately, because I do want to play it.
Mm.
It's so tough. We got it off eBay because somebody mislabeled it. They misspelled pirate and didn't put it under games. And somebody in our Discord shoots me a message, says, "You better go bid on this before I do." And I bid like $50 and got it. And
Wow.
yeah, I've never seen it. Every time I've seen it up for sale, the lowest I've seen it is $1,200.
Yikes.
Yeah. So yeah, when and the guy that sent me that message, he goes, "I love that you have it." He goes, "But God, do I hate that you have it." He would have got it for $50 if he would have never told me. Which, getting a copy of that is insane. It's because again, they sent out copies to a handful of game stores and like game reviewers, and then the show got canceled and the game got axed.
No, I should clarify. I don't own a physical copy of the
Oh,
book. Someone I assumed that it was like someone that was involved with the creation of it or something, but it was like up on a website, and I don't mean like download it. Like they had the full rules up on the
yeah.
website, so I just like copied and pasted into a Google Drive.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But
And I have zero problem with anybody doing that, because it's a game that basically doesn't exist.
no,
Yeah.
it's abandonware, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to give you just a moment. I'm going to let you talk to the audience about the Tome of Intriguing Options. I'm going to let you ramble for a moment. I got to run and do something behind the door. So you
Okay.
are free. Talk to the people about the Tome of Intriguing Options.
All right. So, Tome of Intriguing Options is a supplement for Honor and Intrigue Swashbuckling RPG, and it has uh, it's essentially a compilation, but it has additional added material to it as well. It is the first chapter, right? The first section is rules and story, and the rules and story section is essentially just material that you can add on to any Honor and Intrigue campaign, even if you're just running it as a historical game. It has all sorts of different options to include in the game. So if you want a game that's a more grittier style of game than the more lighthearted style that Honor and Intrigue seems to present, it tells you how to have like that grittier tone, or run it as a horror game if you wanted to. Optional rules for things like making player-facing roles, or making or how to handle it when your players make something up that's not in the rules. Like the game calls these gambits, all right, that we have. Right, so there's all sorts of rules options there. Also, lots of random charts of making random adventures, making random roadside encounters, and all this other stuff. The second chapter is called the Duelist's Guide. This has 40 some dueling styles in it. Um, it's including um, including historical ones, but also uh, ones that are completely ahistorical stuff from uh, like a futuristic technology, right? Like there's dueling styles for using blasters, and dueling styles for using a blaster in each hand, or dueling style for using various gadgets that are built into your armor that you can shoot at people and stuff like that. But it also has like kenjutsu and fighting with halberds and things like that in there. The third chapter, Blasters and Intrigue, is all about how to take that swashbuckling sword fighting skill set that the game is known for and moving that into space. So Honor and Intrigue known for two main things: the sword fighting mechanic and the ship to ship combat rules, right? And this essentially translates that into a science fiction setting, right? So we have rules for energy blades and blasters and all kinds of other sci-fi high-tech equipment and vehicles. Also rules for dogfighting between like small craft, like starfighters and stuff, between each other. But it also talks about different genres of science fiction, like cyberpunk or steampunk, space pulp, um, sword and planet, right, as possible. And there's a lot of swashbuckling tropes from those, as well as diesel punk, right, also has a lot of swashbuckling tropes that we have a little sidebar set to. And the rule book does in the back actually have like modern weaponry in it too, like so you can have blasters, but it also has submachine guns and things like that in there too. The fourth chapter is non-human characters. This one has over 50 possible playable ancestries: elves, dwarves, but things like the Chiopterans. All right, Chiopterans are a bat folk, right? And each one usually has like an explanation of how you can use this ancestry as science fiction or for fantasy. So Chiopterans, if you're doing it in a sci-fi setting, would be like, oh, they live on a tidally locked planet that has just this band of twilight around the center that's habitable between the scorching hot side that's always facing the sun, and the frozen cold side that's always facing away from the sun. The Chiopterans live in this band of twilight that goes around the planet, right? But it has a whole bunch of other things like crab folk and walrus people and things of all types in there, and how you can adapt those for honor and intrigue. Um, and these different ancestries, they're not all exactly the same. Like no two dwarfs are necessarily going to be alike. What it does is it gives you options. Like here's a list of boons that dwarves might have, and here's a list of flaws that dwarves might have, and you kind of pick and choose from the menu which ones you want to take. So not two dwarfs are not necessarily going to be the same. The last chapter is spells and spellcasters, and this introduces high fantasy magic, but also psionics into the game. So if you want to play wizards, paladins, druids, clerics, psionicists, telepaths, that kind of thing, this has it in there, right? And so there's like, I want to say like 140 some spells in the spell book. And when you learn spells, you don't just learn it, you can also choose to master a spell, and every spell description explains not only what you get, what happens when you cast the spell. It also says what happens different if you have the spell mastered. So if you have Some spells mastered, you get a bonus die to cast it. You get an extra boost to your maximum arcane power for mastering the spell. But that individual spell also behaves differently if you've mastered it. So, for example, there's a spell called Teeth and Claws that lets you get the abilities of an animal like claws or bite or a poisonous stinger or something like that. And when you master the spell, you can choose, instead of it being a major action to cast, it's a minor action to cast. Or you could choose instead, I'm going to get two of those abilities instead of one when I cast it as a major action. Right. So just lots of little things like that that make each individual spell kind of unique. It also has suggestions on if you're doing a sci-fi campaign with psionics and you're having spells in space, right? And there's two ships that are hundreds of miles or maybe thousands of miles apart. Maybe they're on the other side of the universe. And the two people are talking on the ship, and one gets mad at the other, and he goes like this, and the other guy starts to choke. Well, how does that work with range limitations of the spells, or how can you use telekinesis to stop a ship from taking off out of the docking bay? And it has rules for how to handle that, like it calls like epic running using the dramatic scale powers for the spells, right? And how you can use them at this kind of higher level, right? So those are all kinds of things that can be in there as well. Oh, wait, one more thing is the sword casters, dueling styles where you combine magic with fighting maneuvers. So there's one that's called the Way of the Stone Fist, where in addition to punching people, like you would make yourself have like a stone skin type thing, and so when you punch people, you can hit them harder. When you get hit, you take less damage, and so on. And there's, I think, 11 of those magic dueling styles, those sword casting styles.
Nice. I like that. I like it. I like. There's a whole bunch of little things in there that I think are kind of cool because there's, well, one, Sonics has always been a frustrating one for me, just because so many people get them just frustratingly, complicatedly wrong. It just become like, I mean, most every edition of D&D, Sonics is just this clumsy mess of points that don't work within the system. And that was actually one of the problems with the D20 Star Wars that Wizards of the Coast did in the early 2000s. Was it was basically D20 Modern with psionics mashed in, and it just was it was a cluttered mess. Had great source books, but
Yeah.
oh, um, so it's neat to hear that
the
you
psionics in this.
go ahead.
Psionics in this works basically as a different type of spell casting, and the one of the key differences is that you don't have to like wave your hands and say magic words to make it work. And there's a little sidebar on, well, how do we balance this? Like, if you're playing in a campaign that has regular magic and psionics, well, isn't psionics just objectively better in every way? And the answer is no. For one, they have a different list of powers that they can use, so it's not all the same stuff. And two, um, there are certain things that you can't do with psionics, like you can't enchant items with it,
Yeah.
right? So if you're cutting yourself off from the ability to enchant items, you also can't benefit from having a casting focus with psionics. Like a wizard can have a wand, a paladin can have like their holy symbol up on their shield or whatever, but psionic doesn't get anything like that. They have only their own mind to concentrate on. And there's a list of other possible things, like restrictions you could put in there, like a psionic can't speak while they're using their powers, which, to me makes a lot of sense, unless that power is, I'm going to say something and then you're going to listen to it. But
Yeah, like the Jedi mind trick.
it's just a bunch of ideas. Exactly.
These are not the droids you're looking for, and that's been the problem, because psionics was always supposed to be the concept behind it was basically the Jedi powers, but everybody's like, oh, we've got to do them in a different way. So they always become this clunky mess. Instead of going, hey, how about they're just another type, they're mental magic versus,
Hmm.
you don't have to have, a cauldron or a wand or, eye of newt or whatever that,
Yeah.
you don't have to have, but it's an entirely different list because think of, a wizard and sorcerer basically have the same spells, but they cast differently. And a druid has an entirely different list of spells. Clerics have an entirely different list of spells, and you can do the exact same thing with psionics. And I like that
Yep.
you've done that because again, everybody's like, "Oh, we're going to add psionics in," and because D&D made them different, everybody's like, "We have to do these different." So
Yeah,
instead
I
of
remember in the
oh,
Palladium system, they had like four different types of mana points. Like each casting class had their own because like psionics had inner strength points, and then wizards had I think PPE, right, psychic potential psychic energy or something, and then some other classes had a different one, right, that they used to cast spells, and it's like I don't get why do you have to all have these different ones? Like, why not just use the same pool of points to do things?
and I think it was the hey, we're going to make them the same but different concept there.
Yeah. I guess
And
if you multi-classed, you could technically have two pools of separate sources of power to draw from. But
make you mediocre at both.
yeah, exactly.
It's always the downside to multi-classing in any game. It's like
Yeah,
you've
and
taken
one
time.
of the things that yeah, one of the things that I did do is um, in there. There's like the default rule is that whenever you cast a spell, you spend a pool of points called arcane power. That once you run out, you can't cast any more spells. I do have in there a little sidebar as well. What if you don't want to do all that bean counting with spell casting? So instead, it's whenever you fail to cast a spell, you lose a point of composure. Every character has three composure, right? Whenever you cast a spell, you lose a point of composure. That's a -1 to all of your rolls, and you're wearing yourself out from casting, right? So you fail to cast, you lose a point of composure. You lose all your composure. You can't cast anymore. If you want to recover composure that you lost from casting, 2 hours of rest or meditation will get it back. So
Nice.
you can you can run the game without having to worry as much about the 5 minute adventuring day being an issue, because most casters are going to be good enough at casting that they're not going to fail that often, presumably. So yeah, but I have that in there as an option as well.
And with magic in any system, you've got to find a way to not make it so that it overtakes everything else. Because like original D&D, your magic user just sucked for quite some time until all of a sudden your magic user is now the center of the party, and everybody else you're like, oh, I'm the fighting man, and I am horrible compared to the magic user now. Fighting man
Yeah,
was awesome.
the linear fighter versus the quadratic wizard is what I've
Exactly.
heard that referred to many a time. What
And
one of the things that I handle that is, so in the regular honor and intrigue book, there is magic, but it's in the very last chapter called Mysteries, Horrors, and Wonders. And that magic is like hermetic magic, like making alchemy and making talismans and stuff. It's not, or soothsaying, fortune telling. It's not like I'm whizzing fireballs at people, right? That's called sorcery in the main book, and it's evil. And you, if you do it, you're an NPC, right? So, in this game, I'm like, okay, I want to make it so that people can cast these more powerful types of spells, but within like a little bit more governed system. And so one of the ways that I do that is every casting career, because there's careers, right, as your skill system. Um, the casting careers have to have a connected career that represents the knowledge that they get from the spellcast, or the knowledge about magic versus the sheer raw power. And those two careers cannot be more than 1 point apart. So you can't be like, okay, I have wizard career, I'm gonna raise it to like 10, right? And then leave everything else at 0. No, if you want to get your wizard career to 3, you have to raise your magician or scholar career to 2, right? If you want to get your cleric spellcasting career to a 4, you have to first raise your priest or healer career up to 3. If you want to get your um, druid or shaman career up to uh, 2, you have to first make sure you have a full point invested in naturalist or apothecary, right? Whichever is connected to that. The one with psionics, though, is that because the science fiction is so varied on this, it doesn't actually have a hard and fast list of this is exactly like the 2 careers that have to be connected to psionics. It depends on the universe. So if it's a Star Wars type setting, I would just call that career Jedi, right? Or you could call it seer if you want to, but uh, but Jedi, and then your rank in Jedi is your maximum rank in sets your maximum rank in Force user, right? But if you're doing like a Babylon 5 type setting, the Psychops, it would be police, right? Your rank in police
Hmm.
would dictate what rank you could get to in Psionicist, right?
So
Or
basically, the
um,
way to think about it is one path is the ability to actually cast, and the other is your grounding and research in the what you need to cast.
that is correct. However, I think I just lost the feed.
Oh no, you're fine. I'm the one that went bonkers. I gotta find out what's going on here.
All right, hopefully you saw that. I don't know if you can see or hear me anymore. Uh, you can hear me. Oh, okay.
Okay. Looks
Okay, I
like.
can see you again.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me or not. I
I
can
I can hear
see
you.
you, but I can't hear you.
Okay. I gotta find out where my glitch is going. I moved offices. Um, you have me now.
Okay, now I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
So yeah, I moved offices, and somewhere in the move, I'm having a weird USB glitch with my camera and my audio. Uh,
Hmm.
I don't know what's going on, so I'm gonna have to track that down. But that'll probably wait till after Gen Con. Um,
Hmm.
oh, leaving for Gen Con this weekend. Oh,
Yeah.
these
It's a
things
long
sneak up on.
flight.
We're driving.
Oh, you are? Are you bringing the whole library?
No, just a portion, because we can't afford. Yeah. So now that we're
Bring an
somewhere.
RV.
Actually, it's just a SUV, and we pack about 2,000 pounds of books into it, and then
Oh
drive.
wow.
And there's 2 of us in the vehicle, but only one of us have a driver's license. So, um,
Ooh.
yeah. But thankfully, I actually like to drive.
Well, that's good.
So the first year we went to Gen Con, I shipped the library, and it was the first time the library went somewhere without me, like not
Hmm.
taking it. And I looked at the wife, it's on the pallet, it's all wrapped up, and I was like, man, I got a really bad feeling about this. And Everybody's like, no, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So I fly into Indianapolis. I go get the U-Haul, drive over, and I actually sleep in the parking lot of the warehouse because their front desk wasn't open yet. And I get in, as soon as their doors open, I get there, and the Gale Force 9 guys are right behind me. And they're like, you okay? Because I'm all like fidgety and like, oh. And I was like, I just have the worst feeling. And they're like, oh, it'll be fine. We ship stuff all the time. And get up to the counter, and the lady was like, oh, that was picked up yesterday. I was like, what do you mean it was picked up yesterday?
By
She goes,
whom?
yeah, she's like, somebody from your company. Do you have somebody you can email? I was like, ma'am, you're looking at the entire email roster of my company. The only person that should have picked it up was me.
So someone stole it.
Well, so it got put on another truck going towards Chicago. So it took them a couple hours to figure out where it went. And so I hop in the U-Haul, drive to Chicago. Like literally it's in the suburbs of Chicago. And they won't release it until somebody pays $1,200. And I was like, I don't have that money. And the lady there, she goes, it's not your fault. She goes, it's the warehouse you were at. They've got to pay. So they've got to pay for our driver's time and everything. And I was like, oh. So I'm out in the warehouse talking to all the warehouse workers about role-playing games. And I'm digging into boxes and showing books and everything. And she finally gets it. She goes, look, this guy is here talking to all my warehouse people about something they didn't even know existed 10 minutes ago. And so they finally pay it. It gets released. They're awesome. They load up the U-Haul for me because it was just in a van, because I was like, hey, I'm just taking it 3 miles into downtown. I'm not driving another section. So finally I don't realize that as I'm planning out everything, I'm like, man, I'm going to get back just in time to be able to get to the loading dock. I don't know that I've crossed a time zone. So I get back an hour after about 45 minutes after the loading dock is closed. So now I have to park on the street, and I'm trucking one freaking cart of books 2 blocks through the summer heat of Indianapolis at like 6 in the evening, and it's actually super hot there at 6 in the evening.
Yes, yeah, it's still light out.
Yeah, I'm just sweating buckets as I'm moving. It was about 1,500 pounds of books at the time. So, needless to say, I don't really want to go through somebody shipping the books for us again.
No.
And it costs, with fuel prices and everything, we started doing the math. Shipping the library and our flights actually are more expensive than us driving and hotels. We save about $600 driving there.
Wow.
So it basically we save on a plane ticket driving there, and that's including hotels and gas and everything there and back. So the only other place we ship to is PAX is awesome, and they actually, because their headquarters is just up the road from us, they actually ship the library from a portion of the library from here to Philadelphia for PAX Unplugged, because they like what we do, and yeah, it's super awesome of them, because we wouldn't be able to do PAX Unplugged. In fact, I got to get with them because we got to figure out, because we're going to try to send a chunk forward for PAX Unplugged and let them keep it till PAX East, so we can just fly out for PAX East. But I love being able to get to these events, but it does cost a lot of money. We are always negative every year. A handful of us pitch in money. We get people to donate. Between events, the library lives in climate-controlled storage, so that's it's $300 a month because it's 2 10 by 10 units.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is not a. It's funny because it started off with just me pulling 348 books off a shelf in my house to occupy a space at a Comic-Con.
Oh wow!
Kind of on a whim, and it's grown from there. It is bonkers, and that was 2017. So it's 6 years now. Yeah, this is our 6th year. Well, we're in our 7th year. Yeah, we're in our 7th year. So we completed our We're toddlers now. Well, is there any? Our Patreon folk get to ask questions, and one of the people that back us on Patreon always asks us to ask this, and I forgot on Sunday when we did last Sunday when we did our chat. So hot dogs or tacos?
Tacos.
Tacos. I was
Just today, actually.
nice. It's hilarious. It's just he says, it's just a silly question. I always like to see people's answers.
Although earlier, like over the weekend, I did have al pastor sausage cut up onto a taco.
There you go. Nice.
Like we saw in the grocery store, we were in Mendocino for the weekend. We saw al pastor flavored sausage. I'm like, this might be good. It has pineapple in it and stuff.
Interesting.
And so we bought it and we made taco night like a few over the weekend. And for the meat, instead of making something, we just cut up that sausage and put it in there. So we basically did have hot dog tacos.
Nice.
It was good though. It had the al pastor like achiote paste and stuff in it.
Yeah, which is all stuff that can go into a really good taco. So
yes.
I'm a fan of both, just because for very different reasons. Mostly because, like, I always say, you got kind of three kinds of tacos. You have like the high end like frou tacos. You got the street tacos, and then you've got like good restaurant tacos. And then they kind of fall into one of those three things. And your street tacos, anywhere you go in North America, they're basically you're gonna find a vendor that does street tacos, and they're gonna be very similar. Some are going to be better than others, but what you're going to get. But every city in America has its own freaking hot dog.
True. That's true.
Yeah, it's like up here, a guy created the Seattle dog, and we used to have a superhero that ran around the area, and I was out with him one night.
I remember seeing something. Is it that something Jones?
Phoenix Jones. Yep.
That's it. Yeah, I remember seeing something about him on TV.
Yep. I was friends with him for a number of years, and I used to run around and do the video that actually. So he can go.
You were the one shooting the video?
I was one of the guys shooting the videos. Yeah. My video went to court and put 26 people into prison over assault charges and stuff like that.
Oh wow! Yeah. Wait, was this the thing that was involving mace being sprayed?
I was not. Well, I'd been maced by the cops a number of times, because when you get into some of these big events and I'm standing there with a camera recording everything, and the cops come rushing in, and they're spraying pepper spray to break everything up. Yeah. You get pepper spray all over the side of my face and everything.
Yeah.
But I have no clue where I was going with that initially.
But you were the camera crew for Phoenix Jones.
Yes, and so I was out with him one night, and a hot dog vendor that he had helped prevent being robbed like a number of times. So the guy was like, "Hey, you can always have free hot dogs." And we're kind of wrapping up an evening patrolling, and this is like first 2 or 3 times I ever went out with him, and he's like, "Hey, you want a hot dog?" I was like, "I'm not turning down a free hot dog. Hell yeah!" And he's like, 2 Seattle dogs. I'm like, "What's a Seattle dog?" He goes, "Oh, it's grilled onions and cream cheese." I was like, "That sounds horrible." He goes, "Well, you don't get a hot dog then." I was like, "Okay, fine. I'm willing to try it." And holy cow, grilled onions and cream cheese on a hot dog or a Polish dog are just crazy amazing.
I'll have to take your word on that. I can't eat onion, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the things that we can put cream cheese on and change them are, look at a Philly roll. It's a California roll with cream cheese in it. And nowhere should cream cheese be in sushi, but it works. It's fairly tasty. I'm sure a Japanese chef would murder me for requesting one, but I'll go into
but any sushi restaurant in the West Coast has Philly rolls.
Absolutely. The worst Philly roll I had was in Philly, but the best sushi I've ever had was not in Japan, which I've had sushi in Japan. Best sushi I had was in Frankfurt, Germany.
Wow.
It was a German citizen that had he had his green card, living in the U.S., joined the U.S. military, and he got sent to Japan. And in his spare time, ended up going and finding a sushi chef that trained him in nights and weekends. And then he
Wow.
spent like 8 years in the U.S. military, got out, and then moved back home to Germany and opened a sushi restaurant. And he beautifully married like the he made sushi in the most German way possible. It was like it's everything that we got was identical. Like
Yes. Efficient.
yes, it was so weird because it was like you could go there and whatever you ordered, you knew exactly you were going to get the exact same thing that you got the last time. There was like no doubt that, hey, if I ordered whatever roll, I'm going to go back in, I'm going to order it again. It's gonna be the same size and taste, texture, everything. So, is there anything you want to tell anybody before we wrap up our chat here?
Well, I guess if you are interested in backing the Kickstarter, you still have about a week almost to do it. Less than a week,
It,
technically.
it ends next
But
Monday, if I recall.
it ends, I think, it ends on the first. It ends on
Okay.
the first at like 3:30 in the afternoon West Coast time. So, but
It's
you
yeah,
can,
it's next
yeah,
Tuesday. So
yeah. So there's just about a week left to back it. Little less than a week now, and the if you want to find it online, you can go to tinyurl.com/intriguing options, or just look for the Tome of Intriguing Options on Kickstarter.
And I've linked in the chats the links to both bashrpg.com and to the actual Kickstarter. Both of them will be in the YouTube information down below as well. And look forward to. I do want to play the game, so I need to get my hands on some physical copies of the books, just because it's some of the things you've talked about. I find very intriguing. Again, taking an entirely different look at how to do combat. I love that, just because combat is done the same in so many systems, and when
Yeah,
when people do it differently, and it then combat's less of a slog. You're like, yay,
yeah,
combat again. It's
exactly.
like playing a warlock in fifth ed. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna Eldritch Blast. You gonna do anything
Yes.
else? Nope, that's all I got.
I say not till after a short rest. I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you very much for coming on here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And if you're watching us again in the future, and the Kickstarter's closed, you can check out bashrpg.com to check out the Bashman's website and follow all the projects that he is currently working on. And that should give you links to where to pick up all his games. Like, I believe you have them all available on DriveThruRPG.
Yeah, they're all on drive through.
Yeah. So, and as for the library, well, if you want to support us, there's a number of ways you can do it. If you go to our website, alexandriarpg.com, someday soon .org will be our. We finally got the domain, and we're gonna switch over one of these days soon. But you can go there and you can find out how to support the library, get us to more events, get us out there to share all kinds of RPGs with as many people as possible. And then we have, there's going to be no streams next week necessarily, because we'll be at Gen Con. So Sunday and Monday and probably early Tuesday, I will be driving from Tacoma, Washington to Indianapolis. And then I think Wednesday evening is when we first get to possibly, I think that's when we get to set up. Oh, geez, I got to look at everything again. Oh, Gen Con is always such a stress, because it is such a big event so far away. Well, thank you all for tuning in, and well, until we see you, the library is now closed.